Hi, good morning, Veda. Welcome.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us on Wisdom Keepers of Earth. We're so grateful. I have been so fascinated by water and what you're doing. Was there a particular pivotal moment in your, I don't know, your life where you said, "Oh, I'm going to follow this water path"? Because I know you're a photographer, right? You're a videographer, photographer.
Well, actually, it's developed into that. I'm a crystallographer now, so I take photographs of water at a specific stage of freezing. I also am a researcher, but prior to all of these things, my great passion has always been art and painting. So I was an artist for professionally for many, many years. So I literally see the world through an artistic lens. And I would also say that we all see the world through the lens of water because our eye lens is 99% highly ordered structured water. But as for a particular moment where I started down this crystallographic path, I would say it was after having a quite profound healing experience with a specific artisan water here in New Zealand. And I began wondering, why is this water different than other waters? I'd been in a bad car accident um, and I don't know if we want to go into that too much because there's such a lot of other things to share. But when I had multiple surgeries, and on my eighth surgery, they found that I had blood clots in my lungs, and I'd gone in for bowel surgery where the seatbelt had crushed my waste and organs and internal organs and et cetera, et cetera. And the doctors told me that I needed to go on warfarin, which is a blood thinner, which I did for a few months until I had a clean chest x-ray. The clots were gone, and they wanted me to continue to take the warfarin. And each person, I believe should have a choice as to what they want to do with their own body. It should be an educated choice, I think. But for me personally, I was young, healthy, fit, and I wasn't given a complete conclusion as to why I got those clots outside of more too much, perhaps anesthesia or various things. So I went on a healing journey, and a friend of mine who's a medical doctor and practices Ayurvedic medicine said to me, if you might want to try just drinking naturally alkaline water. And he made an emphasis on natural. And that's not that hard in New Zealand because we have lots of the springs which are naturally alkaline. And so I ended up doing 2-week trials on myself drinking naturally alkaline waters. And I had a wellness center by this time, and someone came to me and said that they knew of an old guy that had their own private water source of naturally alkaline water, which was 9.9 out of the ground. So I went and saw him. He gave me a month's worth of water to drink, and he had actually only been giving it to cancer patients at that stage. And they'd been having really incredible results.
Well,
So
9.9, by the way, is really
it's
high.
really hard. And it was, and I looked at it as a medicine as opposed to a general drinking water. And I drank a litre in the morning, an hour before breakfast, and a litre in the evening, an hour after dinner. And that's all I drank. And I did this for, I think it was day 3, I noticed a change already, unlike any change I'd seen thus far. And that was a change in bowel motions. I know it's something that not many people want to talk about it, but it's such an indicator of our internal health. And I'd had loads of bowel surgery. So to be able to see things moving properly, that was like a big deal because so many people literally sitting on the toilet trying to push out a pebble for an hour. And there's a lot of dehydration going on in the world. And then on day 10, I noticed something rather strange because I had all these bumps coming up along my arm and jaw that were really painful. And one of them was so angry, and like I'd put my finger across it, felt sharp. And gross as it sounds, I got some tweezers and I ended up pulling this little bit of green glass out of my arm. And between day 10 and 12, I'd picked out 27 pieces of green glass out of my arm. And they had been embedded in my body for over 20 years because the man who died in the car accident, he owned a nightclub. And at the back of the car, in the car seat, there were crates of Steinlager beer, which are green glass bottles of lager. And when the car rolled, my right side got more glass, green glass, and my left side got more windscreen. And it just led me on to wondering how on earth this special type of water was able to purge me this way, because I hadn't changed my skincare, my diet, anything like that. I just changed water. And that literally led me on this path to investigating what made it different, what makes healing waters around the world different and unique. And then I trialed multiple people with this water also in my wellness center that wanted to volunteer, and everybody's eyesight improved, which is really interesting given how high a percentage our lens is of structured water. People who were very, very fit and healthy, had that incremental little bit of health, a little bit of energy, people who were very, very sick. One guy did a 27-day water fast with the water and had stage 4 cancer. His tumor reduced by halfway through the fast. And 3 weeks after the fast, they found out that he had no more cancer. It was spontaneous healing. And he was doing the internal work. I don't want to take away from that. But he was fasting and using this water. And he was not the only person that had something quite serious where there was sort of something rather spontaneous that happened. So what made it different? And I went to an analysis, and if you look at the analysis, you see it's got high bicarb, it's got lime, it's got various things that are making it naturally alkaline. The silica was fairly normal as far as the silica range goes. A lot of people think it must have had a really high silica, but it had a medium level of silica. I was like, well, what is it? What makes it special? And how can what am I missing? So I started to realize that when you look at an analysis, all you're looking at is what water holds, not what water is. And if you ask a scientist what is water, they'll tell you it's H2O. But then someone else might say to you, as they said to me, the two hydrogens are feminine in the mode of levity, and the large oxygen is masculine in the mode of gravity, and together they create balance and liquid water on Earth, which I loved. And as you investigate water even further, what you come to see, and you might read, is that water is only one part matter, and that matter is the hydrogen and the oxygen, and even those are gases. But what is the rest? The rest is photons. Water is a lighthouse. Water is a container of photonic light. And that then led me on to asking more questions in a direction of what felt more resonant for me. My father is native New Zealand Maori, and there is a great sense of spiritual connection with our water. And many believe that the ancestors are in the water. My friend Kalani Souza, and he's a Hawaiian elder, he says that that water is not a resource, it's a relative.
Yes.
And I am always been much more of that mindset. So I began looking into what other people were doing. And I know this is a long-winded story of what is the first thing because there's so many little pushes by water for me to actually look in the mirror of water and see what there is. Because we talk about water as if sometimes it's got nothing to do with us, but it has everything to do with us. Because if your skin was invisible and your organs were see-through, and I ask that question to children, and they always come back with rivers and streams and tributaries, waterfalls. One boy said he looked like a brain-shaped cloud with electrical rain shining down in the shape of a person. Like literally, when you take the skin away, you realize how fluid we are. We're only a cut away from leaking. And yet, when we look in the mirror with our fourth phase, crystalline water eyes, we just see the body and we forget that water has everything to do with us, other than the fact that we know we need to drink it to stay alive.
Well, it's
But that,
lack of respect, And by the way, I was thinking, gosh, I don't really need my glasses today. It was really interesting how you were talking about healing, and I was like, wonder if I could do this without my glasses. But I think what you're doing is you're bringing awareness and respect back to a relative.
well, I think that's an essential thing, that we can all do. And it's simply by becoming the welcoming committee. When we're drinking water, we're not thinking, or even eating food, we're not really thinking that it's going to become us.
Mm.
And as you are drinking, that saliva in your mouth is the first liquid that anything touches as it enters your mouth. So when you're talking about water, water is always in communication with itself. So the liquid water outside of you is connecting with the saliva inside of your mouth, which also holds and stores the last word and sentence you said. So if you are in gratitude before you eat or drink, there's a resonance still held within the saliva memory of your mouth. And that is the welcoming committee that kind of celebrates anything coming inside and coming into you. I mean, it's a very intimate thing we're talking about here.
It's very spiritual. Yeah. Water is very spiritual. The question I had asked you before this conversation was, I had read a book called Fourth Uncle in the Mountain about an itinerant monk in Vietnam during the Khmer Rouge. And he was raised, he had been adopted and raised by a man who was a healer there. And the man had left the father and left the son at the practice. And someone had come in with a skin problem. And he remembered his father, adopted father, telling him that he could just spray water from his mouth on her and it would heal. And that was one of the discussions I wanted to have with you, was about using water as a healing modality from one person to another. Not that I want to spit on people.
It's really a whole other podcast.
I mean, if we're going to talk about going to the bathroom, we might as well talk about spitting. But actually, the act of spraying, and I know there are indigenous cultures that use that as well, that spray onto people water for a healing modality. And you had said that you were doing some research into saliva and healing, and I wondered how you'd come along with that.
Well, the research I had done on saliva was more specific to observing the saliva and how it freezes and the patterns that form after speaking, after praying, after any of these kinds of things, or just saying thank you, and also not doing anything to see what the differences are. Mm-hmm. And when you're not particularly thinking or saying anything, and you spit into a dish and you freeze it, what forms of these bubbles form, and then they become quite like a solid bubble, I suppose. And then there is like little patterns on top of the bubbles. Now, if you look at the top of the patterns on top of the bubbles, if there's been no influence at all, they just look like bubbles. They don't really show any patterning. Whereas when you have actually spoken something, said something, or whatever that thing is, we start to see little images, or at least patterns on the bubbles that indicate there is something relative to your last word. For example, I'd been talking to a friend, and this was years ago, about the number 8. And I got off the phone to her, and I'd been working with the saliva, and so the last word I'd said intentionally was 8. And so I just spat into a dish. And then, and literally there was this perfect number 8, like it was like it had been kind of imprinted into the bubble. And so I've seen little pictures, little little tiny, almost like rune shapes on the saliva bubbles after speaking, but no imagery at all, or even patterns or lines on saliva where there's been no spoken word or no particular thought process. So this is really interesting. But I have heard, and this is what we probably chatted about online, it's been in my field multiple times now, about some healers, particularly one, and I don't know his name, um, he's a doctor. I'm sure it's a Google away, actually. Apparently he is a doctor, a natural doctor of some kind, but I think he was also a surgeon, and he was using people's saliva and getting them to spit, and they've been using their own saliva on whatever part of the body that he was going to do an operation on. And apparently that saliva would become like an anesthetic. So they couldn't feel the operation. So he used the saliva as an anesthetic instead of anesthetic.
Whoa.
Which is like a big deal. So, and he apparently had done this with thousands and thousands of people, and it worked every time. Now, you'd need to Google it to confirm that this is a truth, but I have certainly heard about it multiple times and from sources I trust. So I'd be curious to learn more about that. The other interesting thing about saliva is it's been used for many, 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 many years for women trying to figure out whether or not they're fertile, where you can spit basically onto a glass slide, and then you let it dry, and then you use a little magnifying glass that they give you in the kit. And if the dried saliva has there's ferning patterns that they show you, then that means you are fertile. If it doesn't, then you're not fertile. And if it's starting to form the ferns, then you're beginning to become fertile. And this has been a method, it's called the saliva ovulation predictor kit. So people have been using this, so people just don't generally, I think they might not have heard about it. But then we're starting to go into the patterns of bodily fluids, of which I've looked into, fairly substantially, urine more than any of them, because it's just so easy to get. And it gives you very clear results. So we've kind of jumped from very, very beginning and jumped all the way through to studies I've been doing, but we can talk, maybe anyone can find out more about what I do, I suppose. And
Yes. So wait, you have a wellness center? Is that still happening?
no, that was many, many years ago. Okay. And I traveled, lived overseas, moved back to New Zealand. But I had some gifts of healing then. And so I worked with clients in multiple ways. And that was I really enjoyed doing that. But it also led me on to learning more about the power of water.
So yeah, go ahead. I was just, my curiosity is, do you feel that the NDEs, and I think you've had several, affected how you did all of this? I mean, it brought you into a new awareness level so that when you were looking at this and brought to this water, that you're looking at it through the eyes of a completely open and different being than you were before. I mean, you probably never would have seen water the way you have, but your NDEs might have shifted you personally.
I've only had one. I've only had one.
Okay.
And to be honest, I call it that, but it felt like something that was extremely real. I drowned.
Right.
And my body had been missing for 3 hours before they found me. I drowned out at a beach. Yeah. And I had felt something pull me down. And, obviously I didn't drown for 3 hours, or I wouldn't be here talking to you at all.
Right.
So without going into those details, because I tend to share them in a more private setting, because it's a very vulnerable share for me generally.
Yes.
But something happened for me which which I didn't remember for many years. So when they found my body, and I couldn't tell anyone what had happened, only in the last 10 years have I been able to do that. And only in the last 2 years have I even been sharing it,
Right.
because it sounded so crazy. But but I ended up having hypnotherapy to go back and relive and remember. And the things that I said, to be honest, the hypnotherapist was like, well, you were saying it as this is a real life thing. Um, and at the same time, it could very well have been a near-death experience that would explain it equally well. But yeah, I might leave that and move on.
Yeah.
But
So coming out of that experience is what I'm looking for. I don't, the story, that's very personal and I understand that. And I'd rather talk about other things, but I really wanted to feel how you felt about coming out of that experience and how you share yourself with the world now.
yeah. Well, I was young. I was a teenager when that happened, just about. I was just about turning 14. So I was
Oh,
very, and and I had a connect, like the experience was related to uh, having an experience connection with beings in the ocean,
yes.
essentially.
Yeah.
And so the responsibility that came from that after I remembered, but so you have to remember, I didn't remember any of that, of what actually had happened to me. In fact, it just made me feel even more alone in many ways afterwards because, I was not a normal child, if there,
Right. Yeah.
and a lot of things a lot of children were into, and I was very quiet and very shy. And so I felt even more different, which was not what I wanted at the time.
Yeah.
And so that 10-year mark when I met somebody who really wanted to help me remember. And I think, I was ready then to remember. Um, and that experience of remembering, I think, came with a huge sense of responsibility, was the overwhelming feeling from it. And the responsibility was whether it was a near-death experience or actually something that happened. I felt a kinship, a love, and a relationship with what I guess could be described as these beings that were in the ocean. That felt like one of them felt like my brother, and um, that responsibility felt like I should or could be able to shed some light on a language, I suppose, of being a universal language, give an opportunity for all beings in the sea and beyond an ability to communicate with us what they need and also their cries for help. And and I think that the way in which I work with water, the water I've seen can create and has a symbolic language which appears universal and remarkable. So the responsibility is to step up every day and work with this life force energy that we call water. I feel like we all have all kinds of things that make us who we are. We're bodies full of memories. And that's part of the attachment we have to this incredible fluid water body, is that we have all these memories that make up our life. So when we talk about them, we're talking about memories and how are we storing those memories? If you pardon the pun, you boil it down, we're water, salts, minerals, and consciousness. And all these things don't die. You look at water, it only transitions from one stage to another. You look at salt, maybe let's say salt, for example, is a crystal. You put salt into water and it gives this kind of wonderful electrical component. But then when you let the water evaporate, the salt is still there, actually in its cubic form or whichever form it's in. And then even when you're cremated, the ashes are salts. And then you look at consciousness, which is a really unique thing because, well, science is still so struggling with consciousness. But I think that consciousness is not something that just ends at death. And so I think that when you're looking at water and consciousness, my friend Moses Hackman, he says that water is the glove on the hand of consciousness. And I personally have seen that water and consciousness is just so intimately intertwined that they seem to behave as one. And is water conscious or not? Well, I think, all living things have a consciousness of kinds. And so I think that of course, there's consciousness within water, but there's a lot of things we don't know as well. And I always try to say if I don't know something, and I think what I don't know is that I don't know if water is conscious, but what I do know is that consciousness and water behave as one thing.
Mm.
I say that because I've seen water be able, and I'm talking about water not as a liquid at this point, not just as a liquid, but also in the air as a vapor within ether, as hydrogen, looking at it from all different perspectives. The secrets are in the subtleties. There are many, many different layers of information within all the different stages of water. Now, I was recently talking to Robert Edward Grant, and he and I both believe, him mathematically, me because I just intuited that there have to be more stages to water than we know. And I think of spirit or consciousness of life, that part being connected to a kind of very vibrational vapor stage, which leaves either at death or has the ability to be the observer or the witness, not judging. And so that makes the most sense to me, because when people say the soul, the subtle body, the spirit leaves the body, no one tells you how. It would make sense if you look at the way in which people who able to say that they're able to see spirit, they say that they can see the spirit leave in a kind of vaporish looking state. And I do think that water, which can be in all these different stages, there's just one extra stage that we will probably be able to see one day. I think science will eventually be able to see this. And I think that is the way that the spirit leaves the body. And when you've talked to people that have near-death experiences, many of them say that they have a sense of rising, looking down upon their body with no attachment, watching it as an observer, and then go on for other experiences. And the word spirit in Maori is wairua. It means two waters, the physical and spiritual waters.
Oh.
So there is a practical aspect to this concept of the spirit leaving through a water stage, especially if you think of hydrogen. Like my friend Isabel, she believes that hydrogen is the spirit of water, and hydrogen means the creator of water. And the sun is this giant, ball of hydrogen, and anything that's getting evaporated is basically the source taking it back home. But personally, I am leaned towards the spirit of water being condensed light, because water is a container of light, and light is the precious thing that it holds. And that feels resonant for me. But I love that we have all these different, ideas and thoughts around it.
So within this light, if we put an intention of healing into this light water, I have a filter that contains my water, and the blessing of that, I believe in blessings, bless everything all the time. The blessing of not only the container that's holding this light water, putting in the ideas of health and well-being and compassion and love into this, Now, those are very abstract ideas. So, I'm not particularly thinking of a heart shape when I'm putting my intention into this water. So, as such an abstract concept of love must be something that comes from our heart, the energy of our heart, that actually, when you feel that moment of gratitude and absolute love, is the time it feels like when to put that into the water. Not so much maybe the symbol. It feels to me like water reflects back what we, you create a symbol, because I've seen your pictures. There's a you dowsing, and then there's a water drop of you with the hand with the dowsing rod I've seen. And so it seems to mirror us. And I'm wondering if water is waiting for us to catch up. It's like, okay, here's the basic level. I'm showing you that I can mirror this. What else does water have to offer us other than it being a mirror as to what we, being fascinated by the idea, if I make a heart, it's going to show a heart. Do you know what I mean? Like there's some more to that. And the way that you showed me that there was more to that was when the most profound image for me was the flaxseed. When you flash froze the flaxseed, and then it showed an image of a flaxseed, and then you had a flaxseed bush side by side with it. That's such a Buddhist principle. The orange is in the seed. It's almost like the water was showing us there's so much more here.
Well, I've seen it multiple times, that water reads potential. So what I do is I put a sunflower seed. I used a flaxseed as well, but I've used apple seed. So essentially I put a sunflower seed into water for 30 seconds. I remove it, and then I freeze it using my freezing method. And rather than design the seed, it designs the outcome of the seed. It designs the sunflower. And with this flax seed, it designs the pod of the flax where the seed actually came from. So it's like the fruit of the flax plant. And with the apple seed, it designed the apple. And then I often let this melt and then refreeze it a day later. And we see that the apple design appears again. And then I would let that melt and leave it for 3 days and then refreeze and see that it continues. And so but when I'm using biological things such as seeds or fluids, biological fluids, the imprint lasts quite a long time. And so what's nice is that I am able to melt and refreeze to be able to see how long these things last for. But you talked about there being bigger things. I mean, I've just written my new book, which has over 1,500 photos in it and through 300 pages,
Right.
and essentially showing all of the things that I have seen so far with water, where it's showing me from when you're working with frequencies, remote thought, Reiki energy, homeopathy, the power of words, something I call hydroglyphs, water and God, water and spirit, water and indigenous wisdom, water and science, all of those different things. And you kind of have to really take some time to read the book, because that is something that's extremely profound. And it's also something that's extremely profound about who we are as people. And it shows us that also that with emotions, water won't design with anything complex with me if I'm angry or frustrated, not because it's judging me, but because it doesn't resonate at that frequency. The other thing that I see quite often is that if I am sad, genuinely upset, doing crystallography, for example, putting flowers in the water to see if the imprint of the flower will be there or something, rather than showing me the flower, water will show me sad faces all day long. Water is far more interested in what I'm feeling than what I'm thinking. It will override all the time what I think I want it to do, to have a deeper relationship conversation with me. If I am arrogant enough to think that I know what water's going to do next, Water will not do it. Water is a constant spiritual teacher, reminding me that I need to stay in curiosity and not make assumptions about what it will do just because it's done it before. Water is wild. And the approach I take, I liken to one analogy. When you go to a petting zoo, where they have like sheep and like deer in cages and like rabbits and whatever. And you go and you see them and you might feed the animals and you go, oh, that was nice. And you come back and you had a nice experience, you carry on. And you compare that, we'll take the deer example for it. And so you compare that to going out into the forest on your own and having a profound experience where you're feeling one with nature and you notice that a deer is watching you and it gives you such a thrill. And then that deer feels safe enough to come up and even eat out of your hand. That is a moment you will never, ever forget. And the only difference is that that deer was wild and that you created an environment safe enough for it to enter into. And remembering that water is wild, we try to control all kinds of things as human beings, including life force energy that we call water. And by doing that, we within this relational crystallographic work that I do, forgetting that water is free is one of the biggest mistakes we can do. We talk about imprinting water, all these things we do so that water can help us. We are water. So why are we not flipping it around? Going, well, we are the restructuring device. What can we do for the water outside of us? When you put spring water next to tap water and I've done controls, I hate that word, but you know what I mean when I'm saying it. So spring water has its own signature patterns. You can tell spring water if it's been frozen within an hour of collection. Those patterns degrade fairly quickly after that. So the pattern of a spring water, I call it a star fern hexagon because that's what it looks like. It looks like a 6-pointed star with ferns off each leg, and you would put that together, it looks like a hexagon. And the bigger the better for spring water. So when you do the crystallography, let that melt, and then you do the crystallography of municipal tap water, which looks like a lot of lines and dots all disordered, like Legos all over the floor, and you put them side by side, not touching, and you leave them overnight. What happens is that of the structures of the tap water have improved significantly so that rather than looking like tap water, it's starting to look like more like what I would see in a river or a stream. There are ferns, there are little flower shapes that it's come alive. The spring water, based off the structures that I've seen, actually improves too. It gets, with one example, it had like hexagons and lotuses, and the lotuses kind of became into this sort of heart shape, and the hexagons got bigger. And why? Why is it that when one's put next to another, the one that's best gets better, and the one that's not so good structurally improves? Well, it's almost understandable that the one that's not so great might improve. But why does the other one improve? Well, that's where you get to improve your mindset. When I was traveling through COVID, I was sitting next to a woman who had a cold, and she was like coughing, and like everyone was looking at her like she was going to kill us all, right? Poor woman. And my first thought, I have to say, was, oh God, I hope I don't get sick. And then I thought, God, come on, you know better than this. So the whole trip from New Zealand to LA, I spent looking after this woman, giving her Reiki, give her healing. Can I get you water? What can I do? Are you feeling better? I knew the moment I changed the way I looked at that my body wouldn't get sick. I never got sick. What was sick was that I had forgotten my own power. The moment you stop worrying so much about you and start putting your energy towards how you can help somebody else, your body improves and its health improves. You need to be strong to be able to help other people. Your body knows. It's so powerful. So with a change of perspective, you can change your life. And within this world of water where I'm working, what I see constantly is that water is like my companion. Like water shows me what it is to have self-love. And that has been one of the most profound things that I've been taught. It's shown me that there's no separation from spirit either. And it has shown me that it isn't bound to time and space. The reason I say about spirit is that my mum, she passed in 1999, and she was my best friend. And she's just the most amazing woman, and I was missing her. And so I just simply said to the water, can you connect to my mum? And then I froze the water using my freezing method, which takes about 5 minutes. And I teach hundreds, thousands now of people around the world how to do this method. It's very simple. And in the ice, there was a very special shape. And I used to live in Japan, and we would write letters to each other. And it was before cell phones and emails and all that kind of stuff. And so at the end of every letter, my mum would attempt to do a circle. Her circles looked like maps of Australia. They were so bad. And then she'd do like a heart. And so that was her little signature sign off. And in the ice was a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. And then every year on her birthday, I would ask the same question. And this year I asked a slightly different question. And each time I would see a misshapen circle with a heart in the middle. So I have several years worth of that now. And this year I asked the water to connect my mum to both my sister and I. And this time we got 2 misshapen circles with hearts in the middle.
Oh.
And the idea of no time and spaces, I say that because I've seen water show me things that are about to happen and show me things that happened 100 years ago. So there's hydromancy in the sense that, for example, I put my thumb into the petri dish of water, then obviously took it out, and I just froze it, wanting to see, would I see a thumbprint? What would I see, And what it showed in the ice was the ice showed my thumb with details of my thumb and the nail. But on the nail, there was a chip in the nail. And I didn't have a chip in my nail at the time, but 3 hours later, I chipped my nail in exactly the same place. And then there was a time where I went to an area which had a lot of Maori settlement, and I got some spring water from there and froze that. And in the ice, there was something that looked exactly like what I call, which is called a pātaka, which is the Maori word for a food storage hut, which were built on stilts. And I thought, gosh, that looks like a pātaka. And then I was looking through historical books on that area, and there had been a sketch that was sketched of the view from that spring. And there were 2 pātaka that looked just like the picture that was in the ice. And just for anyone that's not seen my work, it's very, very visual. Dr. Jerry Pollack, who talks about the 4th phase of water, and the ice freezing stage that I freeze the water at is within that liquid crystal stage. It's at the stage between liquid and solid. And I'm looking for ice onto the top, ice underneath and liquid on top. And I tip the liquid away, which gives me an imprint of the crystallographic impression. And I've seen that water will show information in 3 ways. There's a signature pattern. So I've told you what spring water tends to look like. Rainwater looks like a fanning pattern with a curve. Municipal tap water tends to look very disordered. Filtered water looks like compacted lines together. It goes on and on. And so you have an ability to know that is what your water, the patterns look like generally. Then you have the art of water, which most people know my work for. And I always say that art is the heart of water. And then you have hydroglyphs, and hydroglyphs are where I'm getting more scientific attention for because of the amount of repeatability. And that came from studying how water responds to different musical genres. And there's a huge musical genre section in the book. And I did that because when my son saw Emoto's work, he came to me and he said, "I think water hates me, Mum." And I said, "Why?" Well, he said, "Well, water only likes classical music and John Lennon, and it hates heavy metal. Therefore, water hates me." And I think we have to be mindful of the contrasts that humans are very addicted to seeing, the best and worst of things. Because my children, if they can't connect to the best or worst, they assume the worst. He said, "I'm not that much into heavy metal, Mum." But he said, "I like Tupac, and Tupac swears. And I can see that, like, water doesn't like swearing." I'm like, "What makes you think that?" And he's like, "Oh, look at these pictures." And I said, "Gosh, yeah, there's the power of pictures." I said, "I'm going to show you something. I have never known water to be in judgment. I suspect whoever did the heavy metal didn't like heavy metal. So we did work with lots and lots of different genres of music, including Tupac. We used a song he liked called All Eyes on Me. And we didn't see anything disordered or destructured. What we saw was an eye, an amazing shape of an eye. So water likes to pick up on words and songs. I used Stairway to Heaven, and I kept seeing the stairway image appear. And I've done that now, repeated that multiple times. And then I began to wonder, does that mean stairway? I wrote the word stairway, put my dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds, removed and froze. 30 seconds, just not too long to not too short. And I saw the stairway appear. And then I did it again and again. And over the course of 3 months, I did it over 50 times, because in my mind, 50 isn't random. And then I thought, well, what do you do with a stairway? Because at this point, I'm starting to think there seems to be a symbol for this word. And then I wrote the words climb up, and I got it again. But when I wrote the words climb down, I didn't see it. So I'm like, there are multiple layers of meaning for these symbols. And then I wrote it in a different language. And now and I saw the same symbol. So now over the course of the last 5.5 years, I have around about 45, 46, 47 hydroglyphs, which is what I call these symbols. And many of them have layers of meaning. And I have a team around the world using the same word in different languages, speaking it, writing it. It seems that it's most consistent in the writing, because your energy, your words, your sounds come out kind of differently depending on your mood, your energy. But the written word appears to be quite helpful. Some people choose to type it out. Some people choose to write it out. But for example, the word water shows these wave patterns. And the only difference between that pattern and the hydroglyph for creation is that in creation, there are these seeds, and then there are the waves. Whereas water shows the waves. But if you write water in Hebrew, and each letter has meaning, and it's a much deeper meaning than the English word, you see the same pattern, but other hydroglyphs, of which we're still figuring out, appear. So it's like even deeper meaning that is showing up. So this allows us to have a language that we're beginning to able to understand. And I'm now working with some archaeologists who are showing me symbols that haven't been deciphered yet. And I'll be sharing some of that in the future, what the outcomes of that have been.
Well, that's amazing. The hieroglyphics, I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say about that, because who knows what the water will interpret it as. Yes. So in the beginning, after Emoto, there was a phase where you could buy bottles that had joy written on them or love written on them. So essentially what you're saying is those things work.
Well, I think that it's a combination of things. I think that if you're buying them with the words are powerful for sure, but you're most powerful. You don't need a bottle with joy on it.
Right.
You can,
So that,
but nice to have. Like I have these lovely blue glass bottles that this lovely lady gave me, and you can choose what you want to have on it. And I like blue glass because it makes blue solar water, which is very, very helpful for people because water is so sensitive to. We have all of these see-through glass bottles, but that's putting the artificial light into the water. It helps to destructure those the original patterns very fast. So I prefer to have water that is within a blue glass bottle or Myron glass, which is like a violet. It looks almost black.
and then
Blue
do you
glass.
put that in the sun?
Only blue glass I would ever recommend putting in the sun. I wouldn't never put water in the sun just in a clear container. That would not be something I would do. I
Mm.
would prefer to make like a little silk bag or a linen bag and put my bottle in that because both silk and linen have been proven to build exclusion zone, which is that fourth phase of water, which is a battery. It's also the kind of water inside of our cells. Um, when I was in India, I went to, and I've been many, many times to India. It's a spiritual home for me. But I go out to the villages, and out in the more remote villages, I saw this three ladies. Two were holding a silk sari out, which was one of their wedding saris, and the other lady was pumping a water pump, and the silk sari was held over a bucket, and basically they were filtering the water through the silk sari into the bucket. And when I asked why they were doing that, they said it helps to filter the water, but they also said, or the translator said, that it helps to filter the heart. And even Jerry Pollack says that when water is sitting beside silk, it builds exclusion zone. Well, there's many people that don't like the idea of how silk is made, although you can get it made now without any harm being done to the worm. There are certain ways. But linen also has a high frequency, high hertz frequency, and water is responsive to that too. So by making these bags to put your water in, if you don't have a blue glass bottle, they can be very helpful on multiple levels, as well as keeping it out of the light. Because I had that healing experience with water from the artisan water. And what we did, we put it outside in the sunshine for 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, it grew an algae, of which any living water that's come straight out of the ground will do. Imagine it's just been in the dark, in infrared light only. It comes up and then it's like blinded by this light that it exposed to. And so it's quite a shock. And so then it starts to build algae, because when you add light and you have salts and minerals and water, you have life. So it should actually grow algae. But when we tested that algae, it was a rare type of spirulina. But people don't want to buy algae water and drink that. They don't want. And so if you're going to a place, there's a website called Find a Spring where you can go and collect water yourself. But, being able to collect it into a darker container will stop that process from happening.
Okay. That brought up something for me. I was studying meditation with Paramahansa Yogananda's method, and he had suggested sitting on a silk cloth.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminds me of the water barrier with the silk, or even the sheepskin. I wonder what would happen if you use the sheepskin with that. What would come from that? Those were methods to sit on to meditate. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Why? And now you're explaining something to me. Now I seem to have a better understanding of why that would be helpful. But
there's a lot of wisdom in I loved his book. That was like the autobiography of a yogi.
yes, I love that book. But I feel like you have brought forward so much in explaining a lot of these esoteric things that were taught to us through autobiography yogi, through Emoto, through um, consciousness, reading. I love to read the sutras. Right now, I'm working on the Diamond Sutra, cutting through the illusion. And I feel like you're giving us things that provide proof that, yes, like the seed in the orange tree, like, the idea of silk around water. There's so many of things like this that are coming forward now that are supporting all of those teachings. And I'm so grateful to you for that. It's amazing. I wanted to ask you a question about, if we are water, and we know we don't need to write something on a bottle, you don't need to write joy. You are the joy, right? It's so speaking like a mantra of joy, or getting, if words are so important to the water in the body, what do we say to the body? We're getting back to that, that film. Can't remember what the name of it was, but where she wrote love all over her arms. It was one of the very beginnings. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to ask you, what's your recommendation to help those that are watching this come to their own joy inside, come to their own wisdom, allow the water in their body to teach them?
I think that sometimes it's, that we can have this pursuit of happiness, but I think it's more helpful to have a pursuit of purpose. I think purpose, honestly, is the thing that in life is real. We can't expect to just be like thrilled about everything all the time. We're in this human experience for reasons. There's so many beautiful things and painful things to be human, and everyone has their own experience. And I've had many, many painful experiences in my life, as well as many beautiful ones. And that mixed bag of stuff kind of makes us human, and also enables us to have empathy for others, especially when we've gone through hard times, especially that. And so for me personally, being able to find purpose. Now, some people, purpose is their children. Some people, purpose is, writing a book, or it's like finding something that gets you up in the morning, where you're like, even if you don't feel like getting up, you're getting up for a bigger reason. There's a bigger reason to get up than just the fact that you don't even want to get up. And many of us do not want to get up. But every morning I get up, often very early, because I speak to people nearly every day around the world. And often I start with people in England, and they have the biggest time zone to me. And I have to say, very often I'm exhausted. I don't want to do it because I'm tired and I'd prefer to sleep in. And there are times where you have to find where those boundaries are for yourself. And I've done that, but at the same time, there's a commitment. If I say something, I'm going to do it. And that means that I now go through my life and think, okay, what do I really want to do? And what am I going to commit to? And I stick to what I'm going to commit to. I find what that is. And I commit to the days I choose not to work too, because they are just as important, if not even more important sometimes, because I need to recover and rest before I continue again. And water has taught me that and more. So the way in which sometimes it's funny, we look at ourselves and we think when we're looking at ourselves, we're looking at the body, and that is who we are. And it's so easy to do that because our eyes tell us so, what we see. But when we close our eyes, what do we look like? Do we think about that? What do we look like when our eyes are closed? I remember when my daughter was very young and we used to play hide and seek, and all my children did the same thing. And I know of other parents' children who have done this, but they literally close their eyes because they think you can't see them. if their eyes are closed. If they can't see you, then you can't see them. And as we get older, we become so much more logical. No, well, if my eyes are closed, my eyes are just closed, but I still look like me. Well, what happens if you close your eyes and you just look a little bit deeper into this thing that we have call us, into this realm of this body? I had a beautiful poem translated from Hindi into English, and one of the things it was talking about Radha and Krishna and their love, the lover-beloved relationship. And I think Krishna was saying to Radha, he was saying, because they constantly had this sweetness of separation where one would go. Usually it was Krishna going, and this time Radha was going. And he said that he would hold her in the room of his eyes and close the doors of his eyelids. And I feel like, well, if we can see who we are as light, as something that is just so divine. I really do think we are a lighthouse, a house of light.
Yes.
The water within us houses the light. And there is no darkness, because when I was young, I had to have eye surgery, and for many months I thought I might be blind. And so I couldn't see for months. I was starting to learn Braille at 5. And I realized that even in darkness, there is light. It wasn't that I didn't see, and I had things all over my face, like I had these big patch things, and so it wasn't like I could literally see anything, but there is light inside of us, and I could still make out things and shapes and geometries, even without sight. In fact, there was a study done on people who were born blind. So people who are born blind say that they only have dreams and senses outside of sight. So they hear things, they touch things, they sense things. But people who were born later in life dream in pictures like we do. So they did the study on either 17 or 21 people. I can't remember the amount. And it was documented, and it was only done where there could be verified cases of people who were born blind, who'd never seen the world, who had died and had near-death experiences and came back. And all of them were able to share with the people in the room what they saw. They explained what the room looked like, what the people looked like, where they went, what that looked like. And yet they came back into a body that was blind, that had never seen the world. They went on to dream in pictures. So what is it that sees? And I think if we just go a little inward, and when we lie in the bath and we put our ears into the bath, the water automatically reminds us of the womb. When our ears are covered, when we're lying back, we hear our heartbeat in our ears, that swishing noise that brings us back to water all the time. In the steam, I like to write to the water, little love letters to the water in the steam.
Yes. Well, that brings us to healing, because if one can hold one in the light of perfection, that's the key, right? Is to see other as the light of perfection.
I think that it triggers a lot of people to be able to see themselves as perfect, because that's ego.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a fine line between that, because little children, I remember my daughter jumping up and down going, "Mummy, I love myself as much as I love you." I'm like, it made me the happiest I ever heard. And now it's, at 13, 14, is my nose big?
Yeah, it changed. Yeah.
Terrible.
Yes. Oh, Veda.
All these beautiful things, and yet people will criticize. I still criticize myself.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like I don't. I absolutely do. I'm with my husband. I'm 20 years older than him. I didn't want that at all. I mean, he looked a bit older, and I look, because he had a beard when we met, he looked much older, and I look a little younger than I am. But boy, I would not have chosen that, but I chose him. He's the love of my life. And we've been married now for some years. And yet, God, in the physical, how confronting it is to be with someone that's so much younger. And it is important to remember your spirit in these times.
Yes.
Like the spirit doesn't age. Like you're still you when you're 95. I tend to think that the water within us as we age is getting more and more concentrated. We start to get fine lines. We start to, have these signs of what we call aging. But what a privilege it is to age. How lucky are we? And so the idea of, some people think it's like plums and prunes, right? But I think prune part is just being this beautifully condensed kind of very special water within us.
Well, I'd like
And
to call it wisdom, if I could interject.
I'd like that too, but it's not always the way. But each person is on their own journey and doing their own things. But I think we just have we're a little bit closer to what many people think of as the end, which I don't believe is the end.
No.
And that makes you think a little more.
Yeah.
Because when you're younger, you tend not to think about that stuff too much. It's just something you'll think about later, or you don't even think about it. And yet today could be the last day. And I tend to have at least two death days a week where I think if this was literally my last day on earth, am I doing what I want? And that comes back to, yes. And if I was to die tomorrow, would that be okay? I'm like, absolutely. Like I have 3 beautiful children. I've known what love is. On multiple fronts. I've known what pain is. I've had empathy. I have left enough seeds for people to take my work and make it go so much further. That makes me happy. But there's much more I want to do. But would I be happy if right now that's my end? Yes. I would, I feel like then that would be my time. I'd need to move on to do something new or go see my mum and have a little rest for a bit.
Well, you've certainly been on a huge trajectory. I mean, just explosive trajectory with the work that you've done and people reaching out to you. And is it all going well? Are you feeling like, okay, I'm, the stardom, right? How that affects people, and not you egoically. I just mean that all of a sudden there's a lot of energy coming your way from many who want a lot.
Yeah. Well, I keep saying to people, I mean, I think one of the things is like I've always been me. And I guess I'm more me than I've ever been because I've accepted all the different parts. So I'm still accepting all the parts of me. The parts of me I don't really like and the parts of me I really like. And there are loads of parts of me that need a lot more love because sometimes water will show me something so beautiful where I've asked it to show me a reflection of me. And it's far more beautiful than any way I've ever seen myself. And I have to remember that water sees me in a way of which I can aspire to, learning to love myself that much, where I see beauty in all of the aspects of myself. Because I think that we're all reflections of ourselves. We're all reflections of our surroundings. These eyes, they're water mirrors. And I think it's up to us really just to be authentic. And I actually think it's fantastic that there's, I mean, I would definitely not say I'm in any kind of stardom. There's millions of people out there that have no idea what I do or who I am. And there's probably people that have listened to this that don't even know my work, So I would say, go and have a look at some of my website or something and see the pictures, because pictures really do speak 1,000 words, and how I got into the work and the crystallography and how I started with freezing water solid and moved into this technique and all of the different things that I've seen. I would recommend that. But I'm going on a tour this year. I'm touring the UK, and I'm also going to be in a couple of places in Europe and even be in Dubai. And then I'm doing an American tour next year. And I'm so looking forward to it because, this work is not, it's bigger than me. I, this is the work of water, and it didn't come to just make a little drop. It came to flood the hearts of people because I know that water's been wanting to flood again, but not flood in the way it's done before, but flood the hearts of people. And if I can be one little instrument in helping people to see themselves as just so expansively beautiful, and that water is reading their best potential always, it's just a matter of taking one step forward into it. And perhaps with the healing with liquid crystal as well, which we could touch on before we end. But someone was saying, oh, we should make it so that only people on some exclusive thing are able to get their book signed. I'm like, stuff that. I mean, maybe I have to sit there for 3 hours to sign everybody's book, like the book, but I want to do that. Like last year when I was in the UK, there was a line all the way so far we couldn't see. It was such a huge line. People waited for 3 hours to come and give me a hug and have a photo. If they can wait that long, I can wait that long to meet these people, even if it's just for a few minutes. It might get to a point where it's just getting ridiculous, but I want that. It's the people. The people are who are going to make the difference. And my job, my responsibility is to remain authentic. And I just have to keep showing up. And so often it's the showing up that makes me feel happy. I
Mm.
get a lot of joy out of doing this work. Um, and it's just something that's important. But when you see that other people are affected and it's helped them see the world from a different perspective, that's helped them, it's like there's such a stirring inside of the water in me, because water is upgrading itself by doing this with all the people. That water is self-learning. I constantly say, I share about why I say that in the book. But I'll end with liquid crystal medicine because it's something of which children of the world have taught me, and that we've had amazing success with so far in the last 2 years. So when people learned the freezing method, which I've kind of touched on, it's very short, and you're looking for liquid on top and ice underneath, and you tip the liquid away and you photograph the remaining crystallography, which is in a very unique state of water. It gives you this three-dimensional kind of incredibly clear view of imagery. But I was holding the dish up years ago, and my daughter Shanti, she said, oh, can I have that, Mummy? And I gave her the dish, and she began to eat the ice. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, it's good for me. I was like, really? And so then her brother, who came, and he did exactly the same thing like 3 weeks later, separate to Shanti, and said the same thing. I'm like, what do these children know that I don't know? And so now I've taught many, many parents, and they tell me, oh, my children are eating the crystallography. I'm like, you know what? My children are doing that too. And then my husband, who was doing a couple of years ago a study on plant medicines using my method, and he was writing words. He was using words. And so he would write the word of a different plant medicine. He helped me actually find a hieroglyph using plant medicines, and that hieroglyph means visionary. And so he would write, for this 1 week, he wrote the word ayahuasca. So he'd write the word. Sometimes he'd even do the kind of molecular compounds, and he was really getting into it. And then he froze it, he photographed it, but then he would eat the ice. So he ate ayahuasca ice for a week. And my husband is not prone to exaggeration. He's a very straight up, honest person. And so he said, look, I think I really need to take this more seriously, because he was starting to have like more kind of lucid dreams and some mild experiences. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And then I started to share that with people on my beginners workshops, teaching them the technique. And I only have small groups for that. And so I said, if anyone's, keen to try this, please do. And just find the word that comes out of the well of knowledge inside of you that might not even make sense logically, but it's where you'll know it's the right word. You write it down, you put your dish of water on top of it for 30 seconds or a minute, whichever you like, remove and freeze. And then when you take out the ice and tip the liquid away, you eat the ice. And it will start to melt, just eat it. And so there's a lot of people that have insomnia. And so I had a lady reach out that had used the word rest for a week. And then she actually was able to finally sleep, and it really helped her insomnia. I've had all kinds of, I had a headache. And so I wrote the word purple, which seems like, why purple? Well, maybe it's a color energy I need or something. And I ate the ice afterwards. And I don't normally get headache had gone within 5 minutes. I have now had over 100 people do this in the last 2 years. No clinical trials, no peer-reviewed studies, no double-blind studies, nothing like that. This is free liquid crystal medicine that my children taught us, and their children of the world taught us adults how to do. And it seems to be having some pretty incredible effects for people. One lady had a very serious reaction to a vaccine. She couldn't walk, and she had all kinds of issues. And she was one of the first people that ever learned how to do this. And so she did it every single day. And for the first month, she used the word connection, and she'd eat the ice no matter what it looked like. And then she started to improve. Then she started to improve, and she started to be able to walk again. And now she has a complete clean bill of health, but she did it every day as a kind of ritual for 9 months. She was also doing the inner work. She was doing some dance movement thing with her arms and stuff. But that was her thing. And she noticed that not only did the water start to taste sweeter, but the crystallography went from disorder to complete coherence. And she was the creation glyph almost every day towards the end of that 9 months. So it's something really easy and fun to do. And people can learn my technique from my website.
You have classes, or you have on-demand video, or are you still?
Yeah, there's a PDF which is on my website. It's been there forever, which just is a step-by-step guide teaching you how to do the technique. And if you put the word blessing in the code as you check out, it's free. And I do beginners workshops. So there's 20 people to a workshop. That's as many as I can handle. The workshops always end up going for like 3 hours because I have to look at everyone's crystallography. We do it in real time, but that's booked out till the end of the year. They're very, very popular.
Are those in person or online?
They're all online.
Okay.
It's actually much easier. It means people can be in their kitchens, near their freezers to do it.
Okay.
We've got it working very well. And also in the book, the technique is also at the back, so you can learn how to do it at the back.
Can you show the front cover of the book again? The living language of water. That's beautiful.
This picture on the front is water's response to a song called Water Poem by Ram Dass, which is this is the star fern hexagon shape that I talk about that you see in spring water as well. Although this wasn't spring water, this was the response to his chant, his song.
Lovely. Oh, Veda, it's just been such a pleasure to have you. Really. I was looking forward to this for so long. The minute I saw you, I said, oh, yeah, there's a sister. Yes, thank you so very much for joining me on Wisdom Keepers of Earth. It's just extraordinary to have you. We'll put all the details for people to find you. I did see a listing for all of your UK engagements. Maybe you can send us an image of that, or find it somewhere. If it's online, we can post that as well for you.
Yeah,
But
that will be able that was just letting people save the date, so people will be able to book I think towards at the end of June, when it will be live on the website, and the book launch is also the 29th of June, so then people can be able to order the book for the first time. So I'm
yay!
very
Congratulations, yay! By the way, I just came back from Malvern, and that well water was the best well water I have ever tasted, coming right out of the wells. And I filled as many bottles of water and carried them on the train with me. But I could tell a difference in my
yeah.
system. It was amazing. So, congratulations on your book. Congratulations on your tour. Thank you again for agreeing to be with us and sharing your story and uplifting and helping us all learn about loving ourselves more and having more respect for who we are and what we have to offer, as well as the water. Thank
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I love you so much.